Afade, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us and participating in today's oversight hearing. The Committee on the Guam U.S. Military Buildup, Infrastructure and Transportation of Himena 34 na Lesa Turan Guahan hereby reconvenes this oversight hearing for the Guam Regional Transit Authority. In accordance with the open government laws, the initial 5-day notice of the oversight hearing was disseminated to community stakeholders and media partners on Wednesday, November 8, 2017, followed by the 48-hour notice disseminated on Monday, November 13, 2017. First notice of recess was sent on Wednesday, November 8, 2017, followed by a second notice of recess sent on Monday, November 13, 2017. Last week, we met with members of the community, the riders and stakeholders of the Guam Regional Transit Authority, who voiced their concerns and expressed their frustration and the need for more reliable transportation. We recessed to allow the GRTA administration more time to submit documents that we requested via the Freedom of Information Act, and they have since provided us with those documents. Additionally, the agency provided the committee with a summary of information pertaining to our request. I am grateful for members of the GRTA for returning this afternoon so that we may get some insight into the agency's operations and get clear answers to some of our concerns. I know that we all share the same goal and priorities to ensuring that GRTA delivers safe and efficient public transportation that meets our community's needs and enhances our quality of life. Thank you, and we will proceed. Prior to calling up the management as well as the board members of GRTA, I would like to recognize the ridership, the stakeholders, just recognize them and their appearance here this afternoon during this oversight hearing. Odelia Taitanu Jamie, Josephine Cortez, Evelyn Duenas, Frank Ungakta, Lisa Ogo, Finia Conchita, Kevin Manibusan, Lourdes Mindiola, Clifford Wooten, and Luann Mesa. So once again, to the ridership and the stakeholders who are here this afternoon, thank you for joining us during this continuation of the initial oversight hearing. At this time, I'd like to recognize my colleagues, Senator Talina Nelson. Thank you very much, Senator, for joining us this afternoon, and Senator Regine Bisco-Lee. And also joining us at this moment is Vice Speaker Teresa Lai. Thank you very much, Senators, for joining us in this discussion this afternoon. If I can invite the administration and representatives, management team that you would like to have join us up front, and then if I can also invite the board members, Madam Chair, Mayor Rivera, as well as other board members to join us. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If we can just go down the row and just identify yourself initially, and then I have some initial questions, and then we'll go ahead and allow you to be able to respond and to make your presentation. So, Madam Chair, if you would like to begin with yourself.
Afade, I'm Louise Rivera. Thank you for having us here.
Chairperson of the
Chairperson of the Guam Regional Transit Authority.
Thank you, Mayor.
Ginger Porter, Guam Regional Transit Authority Board, Secretary Officer.
Thank you, Ms. Porter.
Raleigh Pilipina, Chief Planner, GRTA.
Thank you, Raleigh.
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Myra Soriano. I'm the Administrative Officer for GRTA.
Thank you, Myra.
Enrique Augustine, Executive Manager for Guam Regional Transit Authority.
Thank you, Mr. Augustine.
Good afternoon, Mark Chrysostom. I'm the Transportation Supervisor for GRTA.
Thank you, Mr. Crisostomo.
David Arentz, board member.
Dave, you're a member of the board?
Yes.
Okay, just for clarification so everyone understands. Mr. Augustine, the members, several senators received some general information from yourself yesterday, dated November 14th, and then it was updated as of today with a subsequent version that was submitted. So can I just ask you a general question in terms of what information is different between what was submitted yesterday and what was submitted today?
Yes, the information was on our math and statistics and some other minor information that we wanted the senators, especially those that don't have the historical background on what transit is all about and our challenges.
But any specifics in terms of the differences?
No, there's a minor change, and it will show there that corrected, so you can compare. There's
Okay.
no major changes.
Okay, did you want to proceed with your presentation?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Senator Talahi, Senator Nelson, Senator Razin Bisco-Lee. I'm thankful to be here and emboldened by the fact that we have the transit riders here, especially people with disabilities. I have my chair and 2 other board members and my staff. We are here to answer your questions as best we can.
I was under the impression you wanted to give a presentation on this, but did you want us to proceed with the lines of questions?
Yes.
Because this would give a
yeah.
general information and a status report to our people originating from the agency. So did you
Yes.
want to proceed with this?
No, that is just for general information for the senators. So when it's time for them to ask questions, they have some background on our agency.
Okay, then we'll proceed. Senators, we're going to go by different categories. First of all is the fleet status. Secondly would be the safety issues. Third would be GRTA personnel. And then finally, some questions that can be posed to the board members. So in terms of just a general recap, Mr. Augustine, and to Madam Chair and the members of the board, we closed out the last discussion with regards to the oversight hearing, just listening to some of the numbers in terms of the number of vehicles, buses, and minivans that are operational versus the ones that are pending repair. So in this case, the first question that would be posed would be, how many buses do you presently have in operation today?
Today we have 6 government-owned vehicles that are operational as compared to 1 last week.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
We have 6 government-owned vehicles that are operational as compared to 1 last week.
So you have 6 vehicles versus the information that you provided to the senators? You have 5 government vehicles and 4 KEI-owned vehicles. So that would be a collective number of vehicles in the roads of 9. So
That's correct.
okay, but you just said 6. So can we, Mr. Augustine, you know, I'm reading from your report, and I just need to ensure that the information that you stipulate and you provide certainly reflects either your report or reflects the most current information.
Okay, Senator, we have 6 of our own vehicles operational and 17 that are not operational. That's a total of 23.
Okay, once again, I'm only going off of your written report. That's dated and updated as of November 15th. And it reads 5 government vehicles, 4 KEI-owned vehicles with a total of 9. So now you're saying that between the submission of this report and this oversight hearing, you've been able to repair an additional GRTA vehicle?
Let me make it clear, Senator. We have 6 government vehicles. One of them is with the VA, which is not used for transit. So that gives us 6 running GRTA vehicle.
Okay, so based on information that was provided last week, when the contractor provides additional buses, there's a cost, additional cost associated with that. Can you highlight what the cost is presently for the GRTA buses and minivans to be utilized for public transportation, and then what the incremental cost is associated with the use of the contractors' buses and minivans?
Senator, if the government vehicles are used for fixed route, it'd be $50.93. And if the contractor uses their vehicle, it'd be $73.33, or a difference of $22.40.
Okay, do you have the same pricing scheme for the paratransit?
Now, for paratransit, government-owned, $51.42. Contractor-owned, $73.74, or a difference of $22.32. And this is on an hourly rate.
That's correct. Okay, then, based on the additional incremental cost, does the GRTA have sufficient funds within its budget to incur the additional costs as required by the contractors, as required by the use of the contractors' buses?
We have additional money, but very little. That's including using of the FTA funds for bus service operation.
So you have sufficient funds to be able to pay for these additional contractor buses that are being utilized, and shouldn't, at least from my perspective, shouldn't those funds be redirected to repair the 17 vehicles that you presently have that are not operational, that are under GRTA?
At any given time, Senator, there's a mix of vehicles that are out there, both from the vendor and from us. It is our goal to have all of our government-owned vehicles running, and therefore would not necessitate the use of the vendor-owned. That is our goal.
Okay, then, based on the contract, I guess, Mr. Augustine, the concern I have is right now you have 17 GRTA vehicles that are under repair, on standby. And one of the statements that was made in the last oversight hearing last week, just last week, was that some of these buses and minivans require minor repairs, which include replacement of tires, perhaps a change in the tube, change in oil, whatever the case may be. So I'm looking at the 17 buses, and even if you were to get half of that fleet repaired with the use of these additional funds, wouldn't you reduce the additional incremental cost per bus that's provided by the contractor per hour for 14 plus hours a day? So we're spending money to allow the contractor, or to have the contractor provide a bus or a minivan for services for public transportation. In the meantime, we have 17 buses / minivans that are in need of repair, and we're willing to spend that incremental cost. Can you just explain to me, with concerns about a tight budget, why you would take that route, make that decision in terms of paying incremental costs for each and every bus?
The incremental cost is the difference between the vendor not only providing the driver, but fuel and maintenance. Our cost for our own is now we get to absorb that. We have, since last week, 1 vehicle that was running, and over the course of 4 work days, we have bumped it up to another 5. So we are making significant movement forward to repair our equipment, especially those with minor repair issues.
I guess what I'm coming up to is there's a cost factor with allowing the contractor to be able to provide 4 additional buses today. As of today, last week it was a different number. But as of today, the contractor is providing the government of Guam for public transportation services 4 additional buses. It's costing the people of Guam $1,254 a day for those 4 additional buses, which are run, and I'm using a conservative figure, based on your contract, 14 hours a day. So even if I take the $1,200 and I multiply that by 30 days, we're looking at a cost that the people of Guam don't have to incur. If, in fact, we take some of those resources and apply it towards the repair and the maintenance of the existing fleet. That, to me, would be prudent use of public resources rather than paying the incremental cost. And just so that our people understand, and I keep plugging away at this, Mr. Augustine and Madam Chair of the board, because if it was our personal funds, would you pay an additional $22 an hour for services to provide it at 14 hours? Pay $324 more a day to use someone else's bus? That's above and beyond what you're already paying for the services if it was our own personal money. And we need to look at this from the perspective of this is the people's money. And if we don't have to spend it incrementally, but still provide the basic services to our ridership, then we really need to look at redirecting some of those incremental expenses so that they can repair part of the fleet.
I understand the question, Senator, and I get it. The difference between their buses and our buses is slightly over $20. When we use our bus, and now we go out and purchase our own fuel and get a maintenance contract or buy batteries or tires, that will now bump it up to almost the same costs as the vendors. And I made mention of this, that an average bus is about $319,000. And I mentioned this in the budget meeting last year. And that is why if we were to have 18 of those at $319,000 a year, whether it's theirs or us with the fuel and maintenance, that it would, we're asking for $5.9 million. All we got compared to last year's budget and the budget before that, 2016.
Mr. Augustine, I understand. That's not the issue here.
Can I finish explaining?
Mr. Augustine, if in fact you're spending an additional incremental amount of $22.40 for the use of the contractor's buses on behalf of the people of Guam, their money, and you're asking us to give you more resources, then to me it does not tell me that you're complying with your contractual arrangement. Your contractual arrangement says that GRTA, and this is still a follow-on question, will provide the buses and the minivans to the contractor. The contractor's responsibility is to provide dispatchers, bus drivers, as well as schedulers. That's what was stated in one of the media print, that in fact that's a responsibility of the contractor. So if that's the case, then why are we not using some of these resources to be able to repair these buses? But
can I answer, Senator? As mentioned on the last meeting last week, we do not have empirical data on to how fast this new equipment are going to be breaking down. Therefore, we are aggressively trying to find ways to bring those equipment up, so we would be using only our equipment. But even if we use our own equipment, there's not really a big savings, because the incremental cost that we will now absorb using our own equipment is that we would buy our own gas. For example, $259,000 was spent on gas. gas alone, that we paid for our vehicle. So those are all factored in. So
Okay, well, we're going based on the contractual arrangement that you have entered into with the contractor. Let me move on to a following question. Senators, please, if you have any questions, I would encourage you to chime in. Let me ask this question first. Based on the contract or government purchase order, how many vehicles, buses, or minivans should be on Guam's roads providing public transportation at this time?
The contract is this, Senator. We have the option to increase the number of buses, number of routes.
The question is, I'm sorry, Mr. Augustine, the question is how many vehicles, buses, or minivans should be on Guam's roads providing public transportation based on the contract or the government purchase order?
It is not strictly based on the contract, Senator. It is strictly based on what budget we have. So if we have a bigger budget, we have more buses out. If
Mr.
it's a smaller
Augustine,
budget,
the reason why I pose this question is because in your purchase order, under paratransit, it says 10 buses, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. In that purchase order, that's what it says. The requirement is, and I'm under the impression that management as well as the board members decided that in fact, that's the requirement for the duration of providing services to our public. So to me, paratransit should have 10 vehicles on the roadway today based on your contract. On the fixed routes, your purchase order says 8 buses, same number of hours a day, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. So my question then is, if this requirement is not being complied with, because you just alluded to 9 vehicles operational providing public transportation services, if this is not being complied with, is the government still obligated to pay the full amount of the purchase order?
Again, Mr. Senator, Senator Aguon, the contract states that we, the government, can increase the number of buses or decrease the number of buses based on available funds. So if we don't have available funds for 18 buses, then we'll pare it back so that it would fit.
Mr. Augustine, I'm just going off of the document that was provided by your office.
I understand.
So my question is, because we know that there are not 10 paratransit vehicles servicing our ridership out there. We know that there are not 8 buses servicing our fixed route. So the question is the government still obligated to pay the full amount of the purchase order?
No. The purchase order is always based on the number of hours by type of service. If you have so many hours for paratransit, that's all we pay. Same thing with fixed route. Not more, not less. We have that opportunity in our contract to make that adjustment.
So your contract fluctuates based on the number of buses being serviced or servicing our ridership?
No. The contract amount fluctuates based on the budget and based on the number of vehicles we put out.
Okay, so it's not fixed based on 10 buses for paratransit and 8 buses for
there's no
fixed
fixed
routes.
contract in this particular case.
Okay, Madam Vice Speaker, I understand you wanted to ask a question?
I just wanted to ask if there's a reason why we're not getting a copy of the contract, because we're referring to the contract and all these numbers come from the contract, but we have yet to see a copy of the contract. And I also wanted to know, was the agency FOIA'd? Was there a FOIA sent to the agency for this contract, and did you provide the contract?
Yes, we were FOIA'd by Mr. Speaker himself and followed directly right after from the good Senator Aguon.
And the information provided to the committee was the purchase order, with what I was alluding to.
The information that was provided to the committee was on the purchase order, but when somebody asks for a FOIA and it's available, then they can have it either through GSA or in our website. It takes a tremendous amount of time and money to put out a FOIA. We have the documents here. How many copies do you have?
Is the contract on your website? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
You sure it's on your website?
Yes.
Speaker, you done?
And we made reference to that to anybody else in the public that would want a copy of the contract.
I don't remember that being said at the last hearing. That would have been very helpful, but.
Well, we didn't get to that part because we didn't get too far.
All right. All right.
Can I add something to that, Senator?
Yes, Ms. Soriano.
Just in the contract, there is a flexibility for GRTA to increase or decrease the number of buses or routes, depends on funding availability. That is stated in the contract. So we have the flexibility to increase, decrease upon availability of funds.
And my directed question, Ms. Soriano, and thank you very much for that comment, was whether in fact the government is still obligated to pay for the number of buses and minivans stipulated in the purchase order on a monthly basis or for the duration of the entire calendar year. The response was no. So if in fact you know otherwise, I encourage you to clarify it at this point in time. Senator Lee, you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Augustine, for being here and for answering our questions. Also, on page 5 of your report that you sent in advance of this hearing, it talks directly about the current fleet and assets. Is this a complete assessment of all the vehicles that are in your fleet? 23 vehicle assets for public transit service, 22 government vehicles at KEI. So you're saying now 6 government vehicles and 4 KEI-owned vehicles that are on the road. Is this current and complete? I'm sorry, can you just turn your mic on?
Senator, let me clarify. This document is for a read ahead so you can get a little understanding of the...
Yes, I've read it.
Okay.
I've read it ahead. So I'm just asking if this is current and if all of the vehicles in your fleet are listed here on this page.
Yes,
5.
there's 23 total, 11 plus 12. All of the RBOC, which are the bigger bus, is with KEI. Of the 12 MV1 minivan, 1 of them is at the Veterans Administration and 11 with KEI.
Thank you, Mr. Augustine. Are there any staff-used vehicles that are not listed on this sheet that are in operation by GRTA staff?
The staff vehicle are not ADA compliant, and so we do not put it out for service.
Understood, but this says current fleet assets and the current assets of GRTA. So I just wanted to clarify if all of the assets of the Guam Regional Transit Authority are listed on this document.
Just the asset that we use on providing services to the public.
Okay, and how many vehicles are operational for staff?
We have 4.
4 staff vehicles?
Yes.
Can you confirm how many vehicles are operating and maintained for operations for staff use versus what the agency operates and maintains for the public use? Because if you have 4 staff vehicles and you're saying now 6 government vehicles, I just want to clarify.
No. We have 6 vehicles that are put out for service that are ADA compliant.
Right.
The staff vehicle is not ADA compliant. So
Okay.
that's a totally different set.
Okay, and who drives these staff vehicles and how did they come into use by GRTA? Are they federally funded or are they locally funded?
Yes, they are all federally funded. When we bought these 23 pieces of equipment, senators, 2% of it came from the local government. The rest came strictly from the feds. We haven't had any equipment bought for transit in over 25 years. So all vehicles, except for the 2% of government Guam monies, were bought by federal money.
And maybe in conclusion of this hearing, this is something that you could provide to the committee, but if you could provide us with some of the information from the federal government, any of the stipulations that were part of when they gifted the agency with these staff vehicles, what they're supposed to be used for, if we can just have some information about that.
We will have that when we get back to our office. We will provide that back
Absolutely.
either Friday or next week sometime.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Augustine, we're going to transition into the maintenance component. My first question is, in the Guam Post, you had stated that the practice within the Federal Transit Administration is not to have the bus operations provider be the maintainer of equipment. Can you please explain this statement?
I made that statement because even during our state management review period, I was here for the state management review in 2014 in September, the very first day I took the job. I was given an oral advice that it is best not to have the operator that drives the bus also maintains the bus. I guess the issue there is accountability for parts, where the money goes and all that. So that is why we did not put in a bus maintenance contract. But more importantly, Senator, we do not have the money to put out a long-term contract, 3 years plus 1+1, for a maintenance contract, or we just don't have the money.
Now, Mr. Augustine, because you're referencing the state management review and the federal officials that come out on a regular basis to be able to review your activities because you used federal funds, my office has been in contact with Mr. Edward Carranza, who's the Deputy Regional Administrator for Region 9. When asked to confirm a statement that you made in the Guam Post, adding that the practice within the Federal Transit Administration is not to have the bus operations provider be the maintainer of equipment, Mr. Carranza stated that there is no such practice within the Federal Transit Administration that will segregate the bus operations contract from the maintenance contract. These two contracts work hand in hand. So my follow-on question is, who made the decision on this matter? And can you please explain? And if any of the board members would like to chime in on this, because this is regarding the operations, the contract with the bus contractor, the service contractor, and is also inclusive of the maintenance requirement for these buses.
If you ask Mr. Carranza, is Federal Transit Administration at Region 9 San Francisco, Mr. Carranza was not out here to provide us information on our SMR. If you look at all of the transit agencies in the United States, some are strictly contracted out, everything. Some are contracted out just for buses, some are contracted out differently. So there is no requirement for both to be included, and in this case, we did not include it because we did not have the money. And secondly, GSA advised us that if we give the bus service operator a maintenance contract, we have issues with warranty.
But this is, Mr. Augustine, once again, I mean, this is in direct response to your statement.
Yes.
That the practice within the Federal Transit Administration, yes. Your statement was, the practice within the Federal Transit Administration is not to have the bus operations provider be the maintainer of equipment. The response from the federal official, Mr. Edward Carranza, the Deputy Regional Administrator, was, he stated that there is no such practice within the Federal Transit Administration that would segregate the bus operations contract from the maintenance contract. These two contracts work hand in hand.
Yes.
And I believe that that presents a response to the statement that you publicly stated with regards to the operations of these buses, the contractor, and the overall maintenance. What I'm trying to get to is why the decision was made, knowing full well that these buses will be operated 14 hours a day, 6 days a week.
15 hours a day, Senator.
Your purchase order says 14 hours a day.
15
6
hours.
days a week. I'm just saying,
Yes.
the document I have in my folder
Okay.
says the contract is 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. So please,
Okay. We are
Clarify
running
that.
at 15 hours a day, 6 days a week, based on the fact that in previous bus service operation for 16 and 17, that's what we had out. And we remain with that same schedule.
okay,
Now, I
I think you may have to reflect on the purchase order that you provided.
I will go back to Mr. Carranza, and I will do some more research, and I will find something that says that it is not required for us, especially based on our budget. We don't have the money to have a bus maintenance contract, long-term contract, 3 years plus 1+1.
Okay, let's move on, because I want to see what we can do to fix this system so that our bus riders, their concerns can be addressed.
Yes.
And that's why we highlighted the fleet, recognizing that 17 of your buses / minivans are still inoperable. They are presently with the contractor, and if they are your vehicles and your buses and your minivans, they really should come back to you so that you can be able to maintain them, because they're not responsible for maintaining them. I have no idea why they still have it in their possession. Now, my follow-on question is, what maintenance service contract, if any, does GRTA presently have in effect?
We went forward in May for a bus maintenance contract, and in August it was returned. So instead of just waiting for a bus maintenance contract to be awarded, we started using blanket purchase agreement, IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. These were the things that we were using to make purchases of batteries, tires, repairs to brakes. That is the contract that we have, and we're hoping any day now that GSA would award a contract not using local funds or using federal funds. We've assigned the bus fare collection fund, which is classified with FTA as program income. We could use that.
I understand about the IDIQ, Mr. Augustine, but then if we have some buses and minivans that require minor repair, then that IDIQ, that purchase order, should be utilized today.
Right.
So
and
that we can get some of those buses back on the road. But let me yield the
that's
floor.
right, Mr. Senator.
No,
and that's why we went from 5 all the way up to 6 available now.
Okay, let me yield the floor to Senator Nelson. You have a follow-on question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Augustine, I want to invite you to look around this public hearing room and look at the ridership, okay? Now, with a lot of the statements you are making, we are going around in circles. We're looking at hard documents that say that these buses are operated at 14 hours a day. And you're contradicting it and saying it's 15 hours a day. It's this one right here, the purchase order that we received. And also, it was very difficult for the chair to get a straight answer from you on what vehicles were in operation between government and also KEI. So, you know, I want you to consider these things, because really this oversight hearing is to help the people of Guam who you serve also. And so I want to focus on this letter. And it's really interesting because, first of all, it's dated December 30th, 2017, and it's from the Guam Regional Transit Authority. And you wrote, "Dear Mr. Kloppenberg, buenas and half a day. I, Enrique J.S. Augustine, the Executive Manager of the Guam Regional Transit Authority, authorizes Kloppenberg Enterprises, Incorporated, to operate all the government-owned vans, MV-1, without no current vehicle registrations starting January 2nd, 2017. Your patience and understanding to this matter will be greatly appreciated. Happy New Year. Kind regards. And it's signed you. No, it doesn't say for in your place. It's signed by you, Enrique Agustin. And so I'm thinking that you meant for the date to say December 30th, 2016 instead of December 30th, 2017. And my big concern is this. You have to get vehicles safety inspected, which means they have to be deemed safe in order to get a vehicle registration. And here you are using your authority to give authorization to a private business to operate these vehicles without vehicle registrations, which means that they have not been safety inspected, which means you're putting everyone in this public hearing room that rides these vehicles and those that are not here today at risk. So I want to know this is a very abusive decision. You're risking the lives of others, and it comes into question also, where is the board? Where is the board saying, wait a minute, Mr. Executive Manager, you should not be doing this? How did this go past the board? Maybe the chairwoman of the board can answer it, or Ms. Porter, or someone else, please. How did this go past the board? No, I would like the board to answer. A member of the board, please.
We've had this discussion before.
Yes, this has come up before, and I'll go ahead and have Mr. Augustine read the law in regards to that.
We have not.
How about Ms. Porter? Ms. Porter, can you please give me a concrete answer?
I brought up this issue at the board meeting, and because I'd sent an email to our executive manager that I felt it was a poor decision. And he brought forth information that he's going to probably read to you right now. However, I went further, and I went to the administrator of motor vehicles and explained to them that I was getting two different sides of the story and what was the requirement for government vehicles. She provided me with the information that it was required to have safety inspections, and that was to be done annually. And then subsequently, no-cost registration would be issued for those vehicles. I sent that information by email to our executive manager and have received no response.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. So this begs into question, everything is in question the way GRTA right now is operating. This is the most flagrant disregard for human life. And it comes to the matter of, when is the board going to act? Or when are you going to act on behalf of the people? Because I would most certainly not ever authorize a vehicle that cannot pass inspection muster to be catering to those here in the public hearing room. Look around you again. You know, we're taking advantage of the people. Why? And so I find this very disturbing. Please, I'm not, it's no disrespect to you, but this is a very, very, very poor decision. And you have risked the lives of everyone that you authorized for these vehicles to transit or transport. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Would I be able to respond?
I'll give you an opportunity to be able to respond.
Okay. Every day before this vehicle go out, there's a pre-inspection. Every time they come back from the streets, they're given a post-inspection. At no point did we jeopardize any of the riders? Because if the vehicle is unserviceable...
Mr. Augustine, please don't make that statement before this committee when we had one of the riders provide information on October 28th, the incident that occurred, where in fact she was poisoned by carbon monoxide. It was identified by our firefighters, she was transferred over to GMH, and it was reaffirmed by the doctors that in fact carbon monoxide contributed to her health concern. So please, Mr. Augustine, this is a safety issue. And the good senator hit the nail on the head, so to speak, in terms of ensuring that the safety inspections need to be conducted annually. You're going to get a free registration processed by Division of Motor Vehicles, but the safety inspection should never be disregarded with regards to public transportation. We don't disregard it with our personal vehicles. There's no reason why we should disregard it when we're transporting and providing public transportation to our community. So be mindful of your statements considering the riders' concerns expressed last week. Senator Lee, you had a question?
Could I answer that concern, Senator?
If safety inspection was conducted on that one singular bus, I am certain it would not have passed. The incident report already reflects what was identified not only by the firefighter, but also reconfirmed by GMH officials. So, Mr. Augustine, in that one singular incident, it reflects that the requirement, again, for safety inspection should be paramount. And if the contractor who's in the room, a representative, I certainly hope that by virtue of operating these vehicles, that particular requirement is followed to the T, because that is in the law. So, Senator Lee, I will yield to you now. I was going to transition to maintenance, but okay, senators, you want to go ahead and transition? Senator Lee and then Vice Speaker Talai.
Mr. Augustine, we've been reading reports, and then you've reported to us, to this body, that several of the buses in your fleet are down or unoperational. And it was stated previously in the previous hearing that GRTA does not have a maintenance contract. So I have two questions for you. First, why wasn't a maintenance contract included in the RFP for the contract to operate GRTA buses? And secondly, how many buses has GRTA procured in the last 2 years, and why wasn't there a maintenance contract included with these procured from the manufacturer?
When those vehicles were purchased, they had a 36,000-mile bumper-to-bumper warranty.
A warranty, sir,
Warranty.
is not a maintenance
Wait,
contract.
Let me finish, Senator. The next portion of the purchase from the provider, Fukuda, was a 3-year free preventative maintenance contract. Those involve items on the vehicle that are not highly used, fair wear and tear, not brakes, not tires. So it is our responsibility to find the money to fix those equipment as they break down. And yes, as they break down, we take them off the streets. The bus that was mentioned earlier about that incident is a vendor-owned bus. However, what was not told in the story on the newspaper and even here was that there was 9 other riders on that bus, and the same driver was driving that bus, and they did not come down with anything. Now, I could not ask that person, because of HIPAA consideration, whether she had a bad lunch, was taking medication, was he had motion sickness. I couldn't do that. So now I'm letting the vendor respond, because there was an allegation that there might be a lawsuit or a claim, and their lawyers and their insurance would address and find out what happened. This same person complained of smelly people on other buses. So the question is this really carbon monoxide poisoning? Or is this person have multiple
Mr.
issues?
Augustine,
So
the
I'm not
carbon
being...
monoxide poisoning was verified by, I believe, the firefighters, the ambulance that responded to this rider, in addition to medical professionals at the Guam Memorial Hospital. This was not a case of somebody's bad lunch. You don't get, indigestion is not the same as carbon monoxide poisoning.
Senator, I am sure that the vendor who owns that bus, when that incident happened, will get their own facts and make their own report. I'm sure if somebody's going to be suing me, I would hire the lawyers and the insurance to find out what really happened. And once the medic that showed up is qualified to say that a person have a third level of carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is odorless, so how can you smell it? Colorless. So I'm not being insensitive here. I'm saying that there is probably a legal course that's going to happen, and that I cannot get myself involved on a vendor-owned vehicle.
Understood. So maybe you shouldn't even be going into that right now.
No.
And my question to you,
I wanted to make clear what happened.
My question to you, Mr. Augustine, is why wasn't a maintenance contract included in the RFP?
So let me answer that succinctly. One, we don't have the money for a long-term bus maintenance contract because the long-term bus services contract is for 3 years with an option of +1. We do not have the money to do that. Secondly, it was the advice from GSA that because of a warranty issue, that if we allow the bus service vendor to fix the vehicle that has a potential warranty issue, if you fix something else, then that is the two big reasons why we did not have a bus maintenance contract. The bus maintenance contract that we're trying to put in place is actually taking our bus fare collection, which we assign $100,000 to address all this issue until we get further funding. I requested $5.9 million. I only got $2.3, or $2,605 more than last year. That's less than 1%. That is why we reduced the number of vehicles from 18 to 12. It's all about the money.
So you didn't put maintenance into the RFP, a maintenance component into the RFP because there wasn't enough money. That's what you're saying. But you have enough money to pay an additional $22 per hour for provider vehicles to be on our roadways.
No. The request was for 5.9, which would allow us to have...
Mr. Augustine, so many agencies came before this body and made requests. Not everybody is able to get what they requested, but our entire government is making do with the limited resources that we have.
Absolutely, and that's why I went from 18 to 12. We're trying to make do with the budget that we have.
But why wasn't maintenance included in the RFP?
Because we do not have enough money to have a 3-year +1 maintenance contract on a bus service contract. Now, it is not an RFP. Many years ago, the RFP was thrown out because of court proceedings. It is an IFB.
Vice Speaker Talai.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I have it, but I can't find the amount that you were appropriated for fiscal year 2016. Could you repeat that? I know you said it at the last hearing. And so that fiscal year appropriation for 2016. Okay, it says approved for $3,114,000. but your actual costs were $3,519,000. So this is in the packet that you provided.
Well, what year was that again, Senator?
I was asking about 2016, because 2016, okay, sorry, this is the corrected version now. So this is on the documents that you provided, the read ahead, updated 11/15. So according to this, prior to the new contract, you had been appropriated $3.6 million, $3.7 million, and you had operated at $3.5 million. That was the operational cost. And then for fiscal year 2017, after the new contract was entered into, you were appropriated the same amount, $3.6 million, but you operated at $4.0 million. So significant $1 million.
Absolutely, and I know exactly where you're going with this.
Okay, well, no, if I could just finish. So for 2018, I understand, we only gave you the same amount, but, okay, and we gave you the same amount, 3.6. Okay, but between 2016 and 2017, before that new contract was entered into, you received 21 buses, right?
Right.
And we were going to change then from, instead of a contract where they provided the buses, the
23
fuel,
buses,
the
yes.
maintenance, and the drivers, we were then going to enter into a contract where, and this is why we're trying to look at the contract, where we provide, I guess it's a bid now, right? So where we provided, the government provides the buses, the 21 buses that you had received, and the fuel, buses, fuel, maintenance, and the only thing that the contractor was supposed to provide was drivers, right? That's what you testified at the last hearing also.
Yes, and if they use their vehicle, it will cost us a little bit more.
Okay, but ideally, we had 21 vehicles.
Yes.
And so we were supposed to be able to use our
Yes.
vehicles. Okay, and ours are probably newer than theirs, is that correct?
Say again?
I don't know. Maybe I thought our vehicles were brand new in
Absolutely.
2017.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I guess I want to know, what is the cap on the contract per year? Is there a cap per year, or is there not?
Every one of our contract does not have a cap. It goes with what we have as a budget. I stated earlier that the government has the flexibility to increase the number of vehicle or
Right.
decrease the number of vehicle based on the budget that we have.
Okay, so were you going to spend the exact same amount for drivers only that you had spent in a prior year for drivers, buses, fuel, and maintenance? Is that what the contract shows?
No, the
Or
prior,
the bid documents?
let me explain. For 2016, we had 11 contractor-owned vehicles. 2017, the first quarter of 2017, it was all contractor-owned vehicle.
For the first quarter of fiscal year 2017?
Yes, because we were on a month-to-month, and so we were month-to-month for October, November, December. From January forward, we had a contract that allows us to use our own vehicle, and we infuse the number of vehicles throughout the year. We gradually move it up to 18 vehicles of ours out on the road. So that is the difference.
We're under the same contract today, is that correct?
Say again?
This is the exact same contract we're talking about, the one that was entered into in November 2016, and you're saying now it was
No.
effective January
No.
2017?
On 2016, it was month-to-month. It was a month-to-month purchase order. The only time we had a long-term contract was the long-term contract was awarded on 23 November. It was not...
Which year? What year?
2016.
Oh, that's what I mean.
Yes. So, but we did not put the bus into service till the first week
January.
of January because we were already using a month-to-month contract for the remainder of November, but we also had to negotiate a month before.
I understand.
So that's
So
why.
you entered into a contract
Yes.
in November 2016. The services under that contract began in January 2017. And I'm
Yes.
asking you, what was the difference in the price that you were going to pay between November 2016 and January 2017?
Okay.
Because the services were significantly different, and I just want to know what was the difference in the cost.
Okay. We will get you that information, but as I recall,
Because you're making it sound like the cost is exactly the same, and that's why we have no money left for maintenance, fuel, and anything else that you actually have to provide.
Absolutely.
So is the cost the same with the new contract as it was under the November 2016? And
I would have Mara address the cost per bus before we had the long-term contract, because it was a negotiated price every month, and it fluctuates.
Good afternoon, Ms. Senator. Okay, during the month-to-month contract, we had to negotiate with the contractor. They are doing, Kloppenberg is the only company that is willing to provide the services, okay?
yes, well, we can tell from your documents that you spent for the entire year 2016 $3.5 million.
Correct, because that's the only budget that we receive and we leave within
How
our
much of
means.
$3.5 million was spent on the contract, or for the procurement under the month-to-month?
Okay, on the month-to-month, the cost varies. Okay.
I know, for a total, for 2016, FY 2016, out of the 3.5 actual operational costs, how much of that was for the contractors?
Okay.
What it is for
Federal.
no, what it is for local funds.
I would assume it's,
Okay.
subtract your personnel and everything else went to
Yeah,
the
I get it.
contractor, is that correct?
Yes. Okay, originally, in FY 17, we were allocated 3,663,958. Okay, the money that was funded or allocated for bus services was 2.5, because the rest went to salaries, benefits, supplies, other miscellaneous expenses of the agency, and also telephone.
Okay, thank you. So that's for FY 2017.
That's why for
2.5 million went towards the contractor. Correct?
This is local money.
Okay, and then what about for 2016, FY 2016? How much of the 3.5 million went towards?
Give us a few minutes to find that.
Okay, all right. For 2016, what I have here is the bus operation cost, okay, for FY16. Under the local funds, we expended under fixed route 1,138,023, and under paratransit is 1,512,788. So if you add both, it will come up to 1,599, 157. Okay, all right. Okay, for bus operation cost fixed route, 1,599,000, and for paratransit, 1,910,087. So our total expenditure for bus operation for FY16 was 3,509,500.
All right, well, I'm glad to hear that. So that between 2016, you spent about $2.6 million on the contract, but in 2017, you spent $2.5 million towards
Federal component.
Oh, 3? I'm sorry.
On
State that again.
FY17, the total cost of overall expenses was $4,296,480. That's inclusive of fuel cost.
But is that what was paid to the contractor? We're talking only about the amounts paid to contractor for the 2 years. That's it.
Okay.
We're trying to. I just want to look at the difference.
On what is that?
Isn't that what you were giving us?
FY17.
2.5.
Okay. For FY17, Senator, 17, right?
Yes. So for fiscal year 2017, after the first, you've got one quarter that was month to month, and then the 3 quarters under the new bid.
Right.
Yeah. What amount went to the contractor?
Okay, go ahead.
Let me answer that, Senator. If you look at page 10 of the read ahead, that will give you a better picture. So let's go to 2017. We paid $1,808,742.88 for paratransit.
All right, just 1 second. Do these numbers reflect what was paid then to the contractor?
Yes, the total that was paid to the contractor for 2017 is that amount you see on the right.
Okay, then this is exactly what I wanted to know. So
Yes.
for 2016, the total that was paid to the contractor was $3.5 million.
Yes.
And for fiscal year 2017, the total that was paid to the contractor is $4 million.
Yes, there is one component here that you haven't asked, and that is whatever we don't have for the local share is when we throw in the federal money. So,
All right.
so even though you look at what was budgeted for us from the government of Guam, we have taken the government of Guam portion of only for that line item that says bus service operation. Then we took monies that was allocated to us from the federal government
Yes, I
for
remember.
bus service operation. And that is how you get all this money.
I remember
Plus-
that you
plus-
telling us that
yeah,
during the budget
right,
hearing, that
right.
you were only appropriated $3.6 million, but you were able to spend $4 million under the new contract, and because you put in some federal funds towards that contract.
Federal funds, salaries, and whatever else we can find, because we were not given enough money for 2017 because it was
Right.
after the fact.
But between 2017 and 2018, nothing has changed. The contract has not changed. The fleet has not changed. The appropriation has not changed. And
that is
it
not.
looks like the costs are going to far exceed your current
That's not.
appropriation
Right.
at this rate. And do you have federal funds to make up the difference?
I understand where you're coming from. It is not the same number of buses. 2016, we were only using 11.
Under the I know, it's actually worse because
No. We infused more vehicle.
you used more vehicles, but in 2016, you didn't own the vehicles you were using.
Yes.
We were getting vehicles, fuel, maintenance,
Yes.
and drivers.
And that was only for 11, total of 11. For 2018, we were using, for 2017, we were using 18.
Okay.
That is why the cost went up.
All right. That's partially why the cost went up.
Yes.
Okay. All right. But what is your plan for 2018? It's in order to make a budget, you're just going to cut services to the people? Cut the...
No, it's not cutting services.
Well, it's actually what you've told us is you've cut maintenance, and I wanted to bring up something about the maintenance. You've cut maintenance, and we're cutting bus services. Absolutely.
We are
You said you reduced from 18 now to 12.
Right.
Although you got the same budget in 2017 for a fleet of 18, And now we're reducing it down to 12.
Yes, because that's all the budget from the government of Guam and the federal budget can bear. So we're living within our budget.
All right. Well, what changed? Because in 2017, you were able to pay for the 18 buses.
Yes. Myra, could you go ahead and explain that? We had money that was portions
Federal
of
funds? Is it different?
yeah, portions of federal funds, and Myra will get that when she gets her chart, that we went back, I think, to 2014, 2015, 2016.
Accumulated federal
Yes,
funds.
accumulated federal
I remember you
funds.
telling
Yes.
us that during the budget hearing.
Yes.
All right. And that's not the case today? You don't have those
No,
accumulated
that-
funds? So you're projecting to spend over your appropriation?
No,
at
no,
this
no.
point?
We're projecting to go from
To
we
reduce-
established 18
to
to
reduce the
12 to
buses,
stay within
18
the
to 12.
budget.
That's right.
Yes.
All right. Well, I wanted to bring up, there was it's from the United States Department of Transportation, May 2017, letter to the governor regarding, it's called the Federal Transit Administration Fiscal Year 2017 State Management Review Final Report. And I only looked at the part in here regarding maintenance, and it's very clear that it demands that by September 2017, GRTA must submit a written maintenance plan to the FTA Region 9 office and an amended contractor agreement incorporating the plan, which includes maintenance standards compatible with FTA requirements and/or performance measures for timely maintenance. Yes. There's another one that says must submit a maintenance oversight program along with evidence of its implementation. So I just want to know, did you do this? So this was due in September 2017, and if there was some such management plan in place, we haven't received copies of anything like that.
Let me explain, Senator. When the federal government comes out to do a state management review, we are given so many months to respond. We are actively doing that. We're almost finished. That is not a public document. That's an interaction that we have with our federal grantors.
I'm sorry, Mr. Augustine. Please, anything that we do as public representatives becomes a public document with few exceptions.
And we will,
proprietary information for contractual arrangements with private businesses, personal information. There are certain categories that are restricted, but this is a report.
It
The-
says
from a
final.
visit-
It says final report.
no, this is their final report to us saying this is our findings. So now they're giving us an opportunity to tell us how are we going to fix those deficiencies.
Yes.
So,
Well,
if
they
you-
didn't say it was a recommendation. They
No.
said corrective action schedule by September 18, 2017. Both of those maintenance issues were supposed
Yes,
to be taken
there
care of.
are several findings. Two of them are major findings, and we are in contact with our federal grantors to address all of the deficiencies that they find. We have not yet given them all of the answers, and once we do, then the federal government will put out a final SMR report. Everybody can have it, but if you want to see our responses, we will be glad to let you have that. And we'll let you have that tomorrow or whenever, but we don't have that right now.
Well, if you don't have the corrective action in place, then we're back to square one. That's the concern, because the findings are, and I'm going to read the findings for the record now, since I read the corrective action. The findings are, during this state management review, deficiencies were found with the FTA requirements for maintenance. A site visit to the contractor responsible for vehicle maintenance found that there was no written maintenance plan that could support the vehicle maintenance program as required by FTA C 9040.1G, Chapter 5. Another finding was that a review of vehicle maintenance records during a site visit to the contractor responsible for vehicle maintenance found that there is insufficient information available to determine if adequate preventative maintenance is being performed to properly maintain the FTA procured vehicles to manufacturer's standards as required by FTAC and then the citation. And so they state their correction action that they want to see from you the maintenance standards and incorporate it into the plan with the contractor, and they want to see a maintenance oversight program along with evidence of its implementation. And it makes sense. I mean, yes.
Good afternoon, Senators. Two things. One is we did submit a maintenance management plan to FTA. We did do that. We submitted that plan, and it's currently under review on their end.
That is great to hear. Thank you.
The second is we also created the oversight, maintenance oversight plan approved by the director and submitted that as well. That plan on once a month as the transportation supervisor, I conduct the oversight with the contractor. Randomly, I just pick a day, 4 o'clock in the morning, and go and inspect or conduct the oversight of the maintenance on the pre-inspection of the vehicles, or in the evening during the post-inspection. The last inspection that I conducted was 28 October this year, last month, and it's on a monthly basis to where I perform those inspections. So we did, in fact, submit both documents to...
Who certifies that the buses are not safe to run?
I do that, sir.
All right. Are the board members that are here satisfied with the, you know, you were here at the last hearing and we received many complaints regarding, well, safety of the vehicles. That was one of the concerns brought up. And are you satisfied with the safety of the vehicles, or do you feel that there's more that the board could do to ensure the public as to the safety of the vehicles?
Of course, we are very concerned about the safety of the vehicles and would not have it out there running if there is a problem. The complaints that do come into us, right away we call our contractor to make sure that it's taken care of immediately. Now, you know, I'm hoping that this is the agency, you know, that that wakes up, because, you know, as you all know, for a long time, nothing has been happening with this agency. And so, you know, because even with me as a board member, you know, I came on board because we were appointed by our Mayor's Council of Guam, because it's in the law that 2 members of the Mayor's Council get on this board. And because I care about all our people and our riders, I too ride the bus, you know, so not as often as I'd like to right now with all of you. A lot of you are my friends and family. And so we are very concerned about the safety. And because we're on this board now, and now we see it really moving forward, the agency is really moving, and now we're getting in the people that we need to, you know, to do the job. You know, I feel that, you know, now we're being attacked, and that's why we're here today. When we have our monthly board meetings.
Chair, it's not being attacked.
No, well.
It's looking at the services that we are supposed to provide our community and ensuring that these riders receive the services they're supposed to get. That's what it is.
Okay, I'm sorry for using that word.
If you call attack, questioning and making sure that we are responsible and accountable to our people and to the ridership, then so be it, whatever terminology you want to use. But we are here asking questions so that the end goal is to ensure that the ridership receive the safe as well as timely public transportation that they should receive from our from GRTA. So,
okay.
So please ensure that we keep that in
perspective. And again, I am sorry for using that word, but you know, I've been really happy about having our monthly meetings conducted with the board meetings, and that you have a representative there. You know, we're very pleased at that, having your representative here, all the issues that are going on with us, with this agency, because now, I mean, we have had so much done, you know, since Mr. Augustine has come on. Even prior to that, other board members, we've all agreed that the only way we can really move forward is if we fill the position of executive manager. Now we have an executive manager on board. We're having other team members come into play, that are here to help get this system up and running and back to the agency it should be.
Mayor,
Hopefully with all your support, senators.
When was the last time you had a quorum for the board?
October, September. No.
We will get you that information.
And the reason, and Madam Chair, if I may, the reason why I asked that is because the legislature passed a budget that applies to GRTA. And in terms of revisiting that budget that's actually approved and passed and signed by the governor, or he allowed it to lapse into law, then shouldn't the board have met, taken a look at the budget, look at the implications, and then made those decisions in terms of any reduction or any redirection of funds towards the maintenance of buses? Because that I consider a policy perspective. So my question, follow-on question is, has the board met in reference to the fiscal year 2018 budget and discussed what options are available for the ridership?
And the answer...
We did meet, and we did meet about that, and we did have a letter sent to you. I'll go ahead and have Mr. Augustine report on that.
The board minutes will reflect what was discussed. The board recording is on our website. If we were not concerned with the passenger safety, none of the 17 buses that we own would have been taken off the street. But because we are concerned, we took them off the street. Now, when we had a budget that only reflects what we could afford to put out.
But my question to the chairperson,
yes,
Mr. Augustine, was when was the last time that the board actually had a quorum? Because that's where ultimately decisions are made with regards to policy and how that budget is going to be implemented for the duration of the fiscal year. Now, if the board is conceding to management to make those decisions, then my question is, why has the board not met to be able to concur with some of the recommendations or to carry out some of the recommendations coming from management?
Okay.
Otherwise, I need to understand who are not attending board meetings, so that any time that reappointment comes before this legislative branch, then certainly we need to bring that into question whether attendance is going to be an issue, because our board members, if they're not able to make time and commitment to running this critical agency and providing support to management, then those individuals should not be sitting on those boards.
We had a quorum, Senator, in September, and at that time, we discussed, and at one point I says, why don't we just have it 5 days a week instead of 6? And the reason for that is I wanted to make sure that we have one day reserved strictly for maintenance. But since the ridership have been used to being serviced and enjoying 6 days a week, I was overridden and said that we will have 6 days a week. But yes, your answer is September was the last time we had a quorum. The other time that we don't have...
Okay, Mr. Augustine, we're gonna move forward.
Okay.
Madam Vice Speaker, are you done with your questioning? Okay, Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Augustine, I'm really thankful to my colleagues, especially, the chair and vice speaker, for raising some issues about the contract. And earlier in this public hearing, you made mention that the KEI contract is available on your website. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I actually went onto your website and I wasn't able to find any of information about the contract. I wasn't able to find a link to the contract. I was only able to find the purchase orders and some of the multi-step bid processes. It says click on the title below to view the contract. So I'm clicking on it and all I'm seeing is purchase orders. In addition, on this page, it's very concerning. It's very concerning to me because on the grta.guam.gov contract page, it lists 2017 third quarter contracts as of October 12th, 2017. And there are a list of contracts that are awarded for a grand total of $16 million. And so I'm trying to review this and just make sense of it. And it looks like you basically took the miscellaneous entities in the contracts.guam.gov section and just slapped it on your website. This doesn't have any, it doesn't make any kind of sense. It doesn't, I mean, why would GRTA need to commission artwork for $12,000? Why would you need architectural and engineering services in the amount of $27,000? I think you have a...
I am sorry, Senator, but I think you should ask your staff to go back.
No, I'm not asking my staff.
No, no.
I'm online
No, no.
on your website,
No.
and I'm unable to find the contract.
We do not have... Wait a minute.
Okay. Senator.
Is it online or is it not online?
Senator, the purchase orders that are online in our website are considered contract. Because purchase orders are contract also.
The Vice Speaker is asking very direct questions about your contract and what's stipulated in your contract. I'm reviewing these purchase orders, and some of those details cannot be found in the purchase orders because it's not a contract, it's a purchase order.
Yes, it's a purchase order, but it is stated in the purchase order based on attached scope of work or specifications. So the attachment to the purchase orders supposed to be uploaded in the website. I'm just not sure if it's been uploaded.
I would like to address when we had a multi-step bid, it went out, and when it was awarded, the purchase order was attached to the MSB. If you look on our website under the multi-step bid, you would find the stipulation of what the scope of work is. Once we awarded this contract, the scope of work and the purchase order was attached. That became the contract, and we were guided through this entire process by the Attorney General's office, by the attorney assigned to GSA, and from the GSA chief herself. So we do have a contract. Maybe it's not the contract that you remember it to be, but that is the contract. The purchase order plus the multi-step bid, if you look in the computer, that is the specification to the work that needs to be done. Once it was awarded, we waited, nobody protested. It was legally done. So it's all in the computer. It's just a matter of how you research it and your understanding of what it is that you're researching.
So I do see that multi-step bids are listed. There are 2, and then there are 3 purchase orders. So I'm just wanting to confirm with you, these purchase orders, in addition to the inter-office memorandum by our Chief Procurement Officer, that's what you're going off of?
Yes. The reason why you have 2 multi-step bidding, there's one is to address paratransit, and the other one is to address the fixed route.
So, just so I'm clear, there is no formal contract. You're just going off of this purchase order.
No, the formal contract is the purchase order. It is a formal contract.
That's just what I said.
Yes. No, you said...
There is no formal contract.
No, there is a formal contract. We signed the contract through a purchase order. We had a single bid. If you had a single bid, the GSA can say, okay, let's discuss price. Here's the award. You took the scope of work, attach the purchase order to it, and that becomes the contract. If that answer is not complete, we can check with the lawyers that guided us through the entire process.
Yeah, I'm just really concerned that there's no executed contract. The bid is on the website. These forms are blank.
Yes.
And I'm also very, very concerned that in the top of this page, you have a grand total of $16 million for all of these miscellaneous entities. And I think
What was the figure, Senator? 16 million?
The grand total for these miscellaneous entities listed on your website is $16,240,316.51.
Yeah, we don't have that.
Yeah, I'm just as puzzled as you are. I
Senator,
don't think
I-
any
That-
of
I
these
think that
relate to
when-
GRTA.
Senator, I believe that's the entire GovCom amount of the federal funds.
It's on the grta.guam.gov/contracts page. This is not the entire GovGuam page. This is specifically for GRTA, and at the very bottom, it has all of the multi-step bids and your quote-unquote contracts. It says click below to view the contract.
We will follow up with the Office of Technology to find out why that information is not accurate. The $16 million is way off what we're talking about here.
Right.
So it is not correct.
It's not correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lee. We do have an individual in the audience that would like to provide some comments, and he was a member of this August body, and I believe he may have chaired this particular committee at one point in time. If I can invite Senator Bob Klitzky. I understand you wanted to provide some feedback. Please, please. Thank you, Senator Klitzky, for joining us this afternoon. And if you can identify yourself for the record, and we can proceed. Senator, if you can turn on the mic, and please.
November 8, headline is Rider bus caused poisoning. I think that I may be able to present a case that instead of doing what we've been doing here for several years and what we've been talking about right now, we'd probably be better off to just reimburse cab fare and let it go at that. We're spending over $3 million for something that ought to be a rather simple undertaking. Bus arrives on schedule, rider comes up, puts his fare in the fare box or presents a ticket or a pass or whatever. He gets on the bus. When the bus gets to his destination, he gets off. You wouldn't ever gather that impression from sitting through this public hearing or the public hearing that occurred that's reflected in this copy of the newspaper. Sounds more like something that would come from Houston, talking about sending a spaceship into outer space with all the big numbers, the complexities, the clarifications necessary, some of the errors, etc. So once again, I hope that I'll be able to convince you to at least establish a pilot program that would examine the efficacy of just reimbursing cab fare for those people who are currently customers of the, well, I shouldn't say customers, people who have to deal with Guam Mass Transit. Before I begin, though, Mr. Speaker, could I have your leave to be just a little bit sarcastic?
Senator,
it's all right?
you have the floor.
Yeah, I think what we're dealing with here is a spelling problem. The word mass, I think the second letter in the word mass is perhaps wrong. Perhaps it should be Guam Moss Transit, Guam Mess Transit, Guam Miss Transit. I don't know. I mean, just judging from what I've heard here for the last couple of public hearings. So I would submit that the business model here cannot work because the people who are the putative customers of the Mass Transit Authority can't afford the service. Since those people can't afford the service, there is little emphasis on providing the service. I found out today that there are 4 staff cars at Guam Mass Transit, thank you. And I wonder how often the Mass Transit Authority has to cut back from 4 staff cars to 3 or 2 because they're short on funds. I looked through staffing pattern this morning. I think there are about 20 people that work for the Mass Transit Authority. We're spending, how many? 10?
Based on the report provided today,
Yeah.
9 personnel.
All right. So reimburse a lot of cab fare for what we're spending on that. If we had a real mass transit authority, kind that you might see in any number of other cities that have a population similar to our own, people would ride the bus not because it's the only choice that they have, but because it's a better choice. And I can give you an example, autobiographical example. Back in the days when I used to work in Aguon, it's been a long while ago, but I can still remember it. If I could have walked down to the junction of Chalon-Lahuna and Marine Corps Drive with a reasonable, or it was actually Marine Drive in those days, with a reasonable expectation that a bus would arrive in accordance with a timely schedule, I'd have gotten on that bus and paid the bus fare and rode downtown and walked a short distance from the bus stop to my office. It would have been cheaper than driving a car, no question about it. And even better, if you start in Jigo and you do a round trip every day, you're gaining an hour's worth of productivity. Because when you're driving, you can't read, you can't do much of anything, not even supposed to text. So if we had a mass transit authority that was not geared only towards those who have no other alternative, but a mass transit authority that really worked in the way that it could, then that mass transit authority could generate enough revenue so that for those people who are the current customer can provide passes and probably let them ride for nothing and still come out ahead and not wind up spending more money than we take in, not wind up spending over $3 million a year to generate this. If we were to do the right things to accommodate that customer base, we've got the raw materials here. We've got several bus systems on the island that work very, very well. The tourist, you never hear people riding the tourist buses from San Vittorio up to the shopping areas or something like that. You never hear about carbon monoxide there or any kinds of problems there. I don't know if we still run Liberty buses from the Naval Station and from Anderson downtown, et cetera, but that was a pretty workable system. In a lot of jurisdictions, school kids ride the city transportation system with passes or reduced fares or things like that. Even our school bus system works pretty well. So we could have, if you could integrate all of those systems, it would make an ideal mass transit system, because one of the problems with mass transit is you have huge demands twice a day, and then the rest of the time the buses sit around and aren't used. And buses only make money for you when they're on the road. So if all of those things could be integrated, we could have what I would call a real mass transit system. I think the chances of that happening in the near future or somewhere between slim and none. So I would respectfully urge, Mr. Chairman, a pilot program where a system is established that would issue passes on a means test basis to people who currently are mass transit or want to be mass transit riders, and reimburse cab fare. We've got a company on island now called Stroll that follows the Uber or Lyft model, And I think if we could save a huge amount of money with the huge overhead that we have to put, what is it, 12 buses on the road now? We go from 18 to 12 or whatever. The overhead doesn't get anybody from point A to point B. A cab, a Lyft, an Uber, a stroll would do that. So that's my respectful request, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Kliski, for your suggestion. Any questions for Senator Kliski? Mr. Kloppenberg, I noticed you took a seat at the table. Did you have any comments you wanted to provide?
Thank you. Yeah, being as I'm the service provider, obviously I have an interest, but I'm here because of the headline that was just brought up about the poison. Want to clear the air, sort of, to speak. You know, we wake up last week, the day of your hearing, and we open the paper, and there's this sensationalized headline about poisoning on our bus. Now, that bus wasn't a government bus. That bus was one of my buses. And we take this kind of stuff very seriously. So we've conducted quite an extensive research into exactly what did occur. Obviously, Ms. Duenas was sick. There's no doubt about that. The question is, how did it occur? We've spoken to all the riders prior to her riding. None of them got sick. We spoke to some of the riders that rode after, and they didn't get sick. The driver didn't get sick. We pulled the bus off the route. We had our own maintenance people look at it, and there was no carbon monoxide that they could detect. So we hired a professional company out here, industrial hygiene professionals, who are certified in checking for carbon monoxide. And they came on board last Friday, I believe, and we took our senior mechanic and drove the exact routing that Evelyn was on. And they had their machines in there, and they detected zero carbon monoxide. Then I received a call to kind of educate me a little on carbon monoxide poisoning. And as I understand it, you really have to have a machine to tell you whether there's carbon monoxide in the air or something. So obviously we're going to research this, and our insurance company is looking at it, and now our lawyers are looking at it because it's become a serious matter to us. We've carried millions of people since we started this 14 years ago on the mass transit. And we have a pretty good record for that time period. Obviously, we get complaints. Obviously, we make mistakes. But we cure them. We're very proactive. But we have a special book of complaints. And I will also go on the record right here stating, as this was brought up in the last hearing, the bulk of those complaints come from Evelyn Duenas. I have a book of complaints just from her alone. I don't know how she got sick. I don't know how the EMTs determined, unless they have a machine on the ambulance, that it was carbon monoxide. I don't know how the hospital doctors determined whether it was carbon monoxide unless they have a detector up at the hospital. All I know is that the bus that was utilized that day to carry her, there was no carbon monoxide in that piece of equipment, either before, after, or at any time, to the best of our ability to find out. So we started at the Micronesia Mall in a bus parking lot. Maybe the door was open. I can't say the exhaust from the other buses may have come in. I don't know. I just don't know. But I'm telling you that that particular piece of equipment was not faulty and did not poison one of our riders. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Kloppenberg. Any questions for Mr. Kloppenberg? Senator Lee?
Thank you very much, Mr. Kloppenberg. for your testimony. I wanted to ask, it's our understanding that this rider is of limited mobility and requires a wheelchair. In this vehicle that she was on, it's also my understanding that it's one of the older vehicles in the fleet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so she would have been placed towards the rear of the bus.
Yes.
Is that correct? And how many other riders that day were also placed in the rear of the bus?
I don't have that information handy.
Okay, because it's also my understanding, you know, it's a rather large bus and the driver's way up in the front. There have also been complaints that it's just really warm in some of these buses. So maybe the driver is experiencing something different than,
Not from
I'm
the
not sure.
reports we received. The only report on that particular bus was the AC wasn't as powerful and it was leaking. The AC was leaking. So that's been corrected. But it's just there was no carbon monoxide. There's no way the exhaust was going inside.
And there was a carbon monoxide monitor on the bus?
No, there was when we took it around. Yeah.
At the time that Evelyn Duenas was on the bus, there was
No. The only thing we know is nobody got sick on that bus that day except Evelyn, and there were other riders on that bus. When we went in and inspected it that day after she called it, got sick, we could not detect any, but we couldn't smell. There was no exhaust in the interior.
Right, and it's
that
odorless.
doesn't mean carbon
so
monoxide wasn't there because
Right.
you can't smell it.
Right.
But when we took it out with this company who has the equipment and is certified, drove it around, there was no carbon monoxide.
Okay,
Zero.
you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kloppenberg. And, just listening to the report and the statements that were made, the firefighters did their initial assessment, and then also GMH. I would hope that your research is inclusive of investigations with those two particular individuals. We're going to move forward with the lines of questions. Senators, we've discussed the status of the fleets. We recognize that there are 17 vehicles that are presently under with the contractor, with the Kloppenberg Enterprises, that are inoperable. The nature of what the repairs are and the maintenance are that are required has yet to be provided in terms of the information. Now, my question, understanding everything that we have discussed, specifically to the board members, because you're the second line of responsibility in terms of, because it would originally come from the personnel and the operator. They would be the first line of public service in this case. Now, my question to the board members is, what is the way forward? How do we address some of these repair of the buses and the minivans so that in fact we get the GRTA vehicles, buses and minivans back out to providing public transportation needs? I'm asking for specifics in terms of possible timelines, because we know we have the information today in terms of what and where we're at. So, Madam Chair.
Okay, we are, of course, wanting to move forward and do the best we can with resources that are available to us. And like we mentioned that last week at the last public hearing, the oversight was, of course, working with our other government agencies, working with the Department of Public Works in regards to maintenance, making do with what funding we have. As long as, we're able to fund the maintenance part and we need to get these buses and vans up and running, we'd like to do that and make sure things happen that way. And then, of course, there's also the other things we're looking at, the funding or revenue source, going out to advertise and bringing some type of revenue back to this agency, doing whatever we can to make sure we have the revenue to move forward and have everything fixed.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Porter?
I actually don't share all of the opinions that are expressed by the chair. I've been a critic of some of our management, and I've been a critic of operations. In regards to safety, Senator Nelson, you asked what has the board done? And I expressed to you what I had done and the information that was provided to management. What I didn't tell you, and I expect to provide fact here, is that I also had a conversation with the chair, and I asked the chair to direct the executive manager to get that safety inspection done. I do not know if that was done. So there have been many times when I've asked for action, I've asked for special meetings, and I've asked for change. And I have seen very little of that. I've been concerned about the contract that was put together. 3 times I had asked the GRTA executive manager if there had been changes to the scope of services in regards to negotiations. And negotiations of scope of services is something that is usually done. 3 times I have received nothing. So I did a FOIA to examine the procurement documents at GSA. And there are a lot of things that were unknown to me that were negotiated away. And I know that they're also unknown to other board members, because we wouldn't know unless we sat down and went through all of those procurement documents. What I did find is that our executive manager followed the advice of the evaluation committee and the desire of the board to cease the, to cancel the MSB so that GRTA could go out and redo the MSB and expand it so that there would be more competition. That is a strategy that was supported by FTA. FTA does not like to see a single bid. They like to see competition. And we talked about the need...
Just to clarify something, Ms. Porter.
Pardon?
The senators were policymakers, and there's a definitive line of demarcation between the executive branch as well as the legislative branch in terms of influencing the executive manager to take action. It would originate from the board.
That's true.
As the appointing authority.
And what I want to advise the board members is they need to take a good look at what occurred and what decisions were made by management that the board was not aware of.
Mr. Chair, may I? Ms. Porter, can you just please restate, you said you were talking about the documents that you FOIA'd for the multi-step bid?
Yes.
Can you please just, you stopped at expanded to be more competition supported by FTA. Can you please continue what you were going to say?
I believe there was a conversation with the GRTA staff and with members of FTA, and they were highly encouraging that it be expanded so that there was more competition. Having a single bidder is not something they like to work with. And that was the direction of the board, and our executive manager did follow that direction. Actually, there is information that GSA did cancel that bid, and then it went to a KEI protested that. And we went back and requested again in a different manner. It was provided by GRTA. And Mr. Kono at GSA then did state that the bid would be canceled and we could go back out to putting out the MSB again. There was a protest by KEI, and the information provided in that protest, Mr. Kono reviewed and determined that he agreed with their protest and it would proceed. There were statements within that I found confusing, because they stated that that KEI, the provider, understood the requirements for equipment and that it hadn't changed. And one of the requirements was that the equipment would have 2 years of remaining life. I saw a list of vehicles that were to be provided, approximately 26 units that were available, and only one of those had 2 years of life, service life left to them. So I found that perhaps there's two different sides of the story here. And of course, I'm not a part of GSA, but I have concerns for those differences. As the bid proceeded, our executive manager then agreed, and this is what I was trying to get at, agreed that we would only utilize our vehicles and not utilize any vehicles from the provider. In the past, I had advised Mr. Augustine that we would need more than that, because you should have 2 fleets of vehicles so your engines can rest. I could see in the documents that KEI also provided twice in writing advice that GRTA should plan for backup vehicles. In their experience, there is often problems with manufacturer problems that might sideline the fleet. But in spite of those concerns, there was a decision by management to go only with GRTA vehicles. As we look at that decision, and as I reviewed the documents, I could also see that there was, in the conversation, plans for a maintenance contract. And that was discussed in June of 2016, if I recall correctly. Because there was a statement, bidders were wanting to know, how will that work? Who will transport the vehicles back and forth? So there was discussion about the awardee of that contract would pick up vehicles, do the maintenance work, and deliver them back to whoever was doing the operations. So there was discussion for a plan, and that was early on. I do not know why there was no action in regards to that. There should have been action that followed when the contract came into place that would establish a maintenance contract. So it appeared to me that there was a plan, but no action on that plan. I want the board to recognize that what I view as being problems with management are things that they need to consider. Because moving forward, in my opinion, there needs to be a change in the direction of management, and that may require a change in management. That is not for me to decide as a single individual, but the board members need to understand some of the underlying problems that have created the demise of our transit system as we see it today. I've been working on transit issues since 2004. I have never seen it in this state before. It's an embarrassment. I'm almost embarrassed to say that I sit on the board, because I know so many things about what makes a good system, and I haven't been able to make my mark. There are many things other than the management decisions on contract and the management decisions for maintenance. But these are so basic and essential to the core of what GRTA is to do, and that is to provide reliable and safe transportation services to the public. So I could go on about a dozen or so other items that I have concern about. But these two basic issues, to me, are not a product of budget. It's a product of management.
Thank you, Ms. Porter, for your statements this evening. I'm going to direct some of the final questions to Mr. Augustine, but Senator Lee, you had a follow-on?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ms. Porter. So I just wanted a quick question. What expertise does the board have in order to effectively make decisions with regard to Guam's public transit system?
I think we do not have a good balance of individuals who understand all the complexities. We have 3 writers. We have 2 people from the Mayor's Council and myself.
Does GRT management make decisions that should otherwise require your input, board input and board approval?
GRTA has put into place something that I've been very concerned about, and that is they implemented a Southern Shuttle service. That service was talked about by management as being part of the transition. However, the board was not involved in even the concept of the shuttle service before it was put into place. If you look at the law in regards to schedules and routes, it states, particularly for established schedules and routes, that there will be public hearings, that the public will be given adequate prior notice, and that the board will approve before any new service is put into place. When the Southern Shuttle was put into place, it affected Green Line, which was an established route. I didn't know about the shuttle service until it was running. I think that's a terrible disservice to the board members to not be informed. I was the only one who took a look at what's happening with that. How many people are riding? How much is it costing us to operate? Based on information that we were provided to the board at a board meeting, I utilized those numbers to determine a per ride cost. This is a cost that the public was paying for that service. It was 3 times the cost of paratransit service. And some of those routes did not collect fare. Now, there are reasons for that. But I looked at the cost and I sent my calculations to the executive manager and 2 other members of the board, and I stated, this is not sustainable. And it has never been approved. That money, which was nearly $1 million, could have fixed our fleet of vehicles. As I stated before, I do not believe our problems are a result of budget. I believe it is a problem of management. I believe it is a problem of the lack of adequate oversight by the board, and I'm included in that. So I take responsibility for some of that. But the bottom line is, the board is responsible for everything that happens at GRTA. And I'm not proud of what I've seen.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. Mr. Augustine, I have a question for you. It's my understanding that in the enabling statute of GRTA that you have the exclusive right to franchise public transportation on Guam's roadways, as well as the exclusive right to furnish and collect fees for parking at Government of Guam buildings. You have consistently criticized this body for not giving you enough funding, and so I wanted to ask you, if GRTA were to exercise these rights, how much could you potentially raise in additional funds from this new revenue stream, from parking, from franchising out public transportation on Guam's roadways?
Thank you for asking that hypothetical question. We have a transit business plan that was approved back in 2010. We can provide that to you.
Sorry, approved by?
Approved by the board. We spent, I think, $109,000 of federal money that was sitting there. And the reason why that transit business plan has not been executed is because in order for you to execute a business plan or a master plan, you have to have a consistent funding base to execute on a plan. We all understand that. Over the years, and even Mr. Manglonia here was saying that $500,000 went to the University of Guam. Now, if you were to ask the OPA for the last 4 or 5 years of where this money went, which is the liquid fuel tax and the mass transit automotive surcharge.
Mr. Augustine, I'm sorry, the question was a direct question. How much would you generate should you take advantage of the provisions provided to you, the GRTA?
I have no idea. We can hire.
I just find that you come to us and you say that you need X amount of dollars, and when we're unable to give that to you, you need to think outside of the box and look at other revenue streams so that we can solve some of these problems. And it sounds like from some of your board members that there have been opportunities, missed opportunities for management to make good on the work that you're supposed to be doing, missed opportunities for you in creating certain revenue streams that, and I'm just, it's difficult for us to hear that.
Okay.
It's difficult for this body to hear that, and for us to hear that you don't necessarily have a plan. You have these, your enabling statute allows you to create these things and to bring additional revenue streams and to not just rely on the general fund.
No.
And not just rely on your piece of the Gov Guam pie.
Can you give me time to explain this?
Sure.
You have a plan, 2010. It shows all the things that plan allows us. It's our master plan. It doesn't matter whether it be a port authority or the airport, they have to have a steady revenue stream. Now,
so based on that master plan, how much could you generate?
I have to revisit the master plan and give you a hypothetical number because it costs money to install 1,000 parking meters in Aguon, build a bus terminal, have a transit management system where you get on the vehicle and you swipe your card, no money is involved. It takes money to have advertisement in the bus and on the bus shelter, and we can collect that. But let's say that hypothetically.
So, Mr. Augustine, so we're not going to go venture into hypotheticals.
Yes,
unless,
that was a hypothetical
unless you
question.
have numerical information in terms of the assessment, because the 2010 plan has been sitting on the shelf.
That's true.
So there's no need to reference a 2010 plan unless it's taken off the shelf and we start implementing different components.
Absolutely.
So this, Senator, unless you have a follow-on question?
In some jurisdictions, it's my understanding that management and implementation of these fees are managed by private contractors. So have you explored that since you don't have enough budget to be able to do that?
I've looked at and spoke to a person here in Aguon called the EB5, which would bring in an investor to come in and invest their money to do things with transit. I have talked to Stroll about maybe hooking up with them. It's called in transit, first mile, last mile. Okay? The example that was used earlier is, so we have taxis. Taxis must be ADA compliant. The buses that you see used for tourists, they're not ADA compliant, and if it was, the driver had to be ADA certified. So we're talking about a lot of issues here, and I will be more than willing to sit down with you and come up with how do we move forward.
We have sat down.
As a courtesy.
I did visit you.
Yes, we did. But we did not specifically say, okay, Mr. Augustine, 3 days from now, let's sit down. I had 10 items of discussion as a courtesy to the new committee chair, 13 January of this year, which is a Friday the 13th. I am willing to go over those 10 lists again with the committee chair to move us forward. So I have done all of that. It takes money to execute a plan. I know that. We got $100 million for the Port Authority when I was the general manager. So I know what it takes to move a plan forward. Back in 2009, there was a big missed opportunity.
Mr. Augustine, we're gonna, unless you present your plan to the board and then they concur with it, you know, this is really in terms of the formulation of the plan and pressing forward. You need legislation. You have not only the chair, but you have other members of the committee and the legislature to be able to support you in regards to legislation. So we're going to move forward with this. I would like to request a copy of the maintenance oversight program that was recently submitted to FTA. And just a quick question with regards to that oversight maintenance program. Are there specific timelines in regards to the vehicles and the buses and the minivans not only being maintained, but properly repaired and back on the streets?
I haven't seen anything, have you? Have you seen anything, a plan for maintenance?
And I ask this specifically so that we can put a mark on the wall and understand that, let's say in 90 days, that this many vehicles will be properly maintained as well as repaired. So please, Mr. Crisostomo.
Thank you, Mr. Center. So I did create a return to service plan. This is assuming that the purchase orders are awarded and we can actually execute on it for the maintenance, the unscheduled repairs of these vehicles. So we did create a...
And the purchase orders have been submitted to GSA?
It's, the requisitions have been, yes. And as a matter of fact, Monday we received 2 purchase orders specifically for tires, which we already exhausted, and we're pending a 3rd one. So we are executing these purchase orders as we get them.
Okay. What about your oversight program, maintenance program? Does that have definitive timelines in terms of the actions, the deliverables by GRTA, and then getting these vehicles out on the streets?
That is correct. So with the oversight inspection, if it's a safety issue, that is rectified. I will pull the vehicle out of service, and I will, depending on what the situation is, I will take it out of service immediately and get that repaired as well. It's to include the vendor vehicle as well. Immediately I will take that.
Then let me again, Mr. Augustine, if I can request a copy of that maintenance program oversight that was submitted to FTA. And then in addition to that, my question now is, what is the plan forward in terms of getting your fleet back on track? Because I'm hearing from you, Mr. Crisostomo, that maintenance oversight program may not have definitive timelines, issues with buses and minivans, and how they're going to be addressed. So can I hear from you, and please, board members, take note, because this really should be a direct oversight on the part of the board to be able to ensure that these maintenance plans and these repairs of these buses are provided so that, in fact, we can get them out in the streets and not pay an incremental cost to the contractor unnecessarily. Mr. Crisostomo?
Yes. So I drew up this plan, the service plan, return to service plan. And with this maintenance contract that's in the process for procurement, within a month, executing this contract, this maintenance contract for unscheduled repairs, in a month, the entire fleet will be operational. The entire fleet of 23 vehicles that GRTA, provided that the parts are on hand.
And what is your projected cost?
I do not have a projected cost, Mr. Senator. It varies from a minor repair to some serious repairs.
So you're saying that if in fact your purchase order is approved by GSA and with the assistance, and I'm reaching here, with the Office of the Governor, that you could get these buses and minivans repaired, properly maintained, and back on our streets?
That is correct.
Within 30 days?
That is correct.
Mr. Augustine, you have any comments on that?
Again, Mr. Senator, provided that the parts are on hand.
Okay. We all know that whether you're a federal government or a local government, that the processes for getting goods and services take time. So we will have to sit down, and I do have a meeting with the CPO this Thursday afternoon, and we will sit down and outline how to move forward. We have that, we will meet. I have been, and my staff have been, continuously getting feedback and conversation with GSA. We are doing all of this, Senator. So we have a plan.
Okay, then let me add, in addition to getting the plan submitted ASAP, based on your comments, we're going to go based on your comments, and the concern is obviously we need the projected costs associated with that, and I'm under the impression that it's inclusive in your plan. So, board members, based on the submission of the purchase order, and this may require your direct assistance to the executive manager as well as Mr. Crisostomo, that realistically, within 30 days, these buses that are presently inoperable could be repaired and brought back on the streets. So should we have either a formal or an informal oversight hearing or meeting that within 30 days, and I'll stress that timeline, within 45 days from today, that these vehicles, if not all, would be back on the streets?
Mr. Senator, if the contract was awarded today for the maintenance repairs, within 45, that is a true statement.
Thank you, Mr. Crisostomo. Ms. Augustine?
Mr. Crisostomo has been with the government of Guam since the 31st of July. I believe that the projection is realistic provided certain things happen. We all know.
And that's where, Mr. Augustine, and that's where.
That's right.
That's where yourself as executive manager, the members of the board collectively get together and see what you can do to work with GSA to get this purchase order completed so that rather than the 30-day initial timeline that was provided by Mr. Crisostomo, within 45 days realistically that these vehicles can be back out on the streets.
Based on the caveat that Mr.
happen.
Crisostomo have, yes.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Augustine. You have a follow-on question, Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple questions. Perhaps this would be for the board. I want to inquire about bus drivers training. What is the required training, and has there ever been, in any event, bus drivers that were not fully trained driving around our riders?
Bus driver training is required to have at least 16 hours of passenger assistance training. It was built into a budget law, and I've forgotten what year. That has occurred, and it states that the instructor must be certified. I'm certified by CTAA to provide passenger service and safety instruction with national certification. That has not occurred within the last year. Okay, there was concerns about conflict of interest, and my doing training, and so it was conducted by someone who had certification but not in that particular area. It's my understanding is that hands-on training for some of the portions was not conducted, which would be essential for individuals who use mobility devices, because that hands-on training ensures that drivers get sufficient training for safe securement practices. I had requested at a board meeting to get information about the content of the curriculum that was used, because I do believe that we should have content that is in concert with nationally certified programs. Presently, I am the only person certified to conduct CTAA PASS training. This summer, I obtained master certification so that I can train other trainers. My goal is to make sure that we have a group of trainers who understand the curriculum and are able to deliver curriculum that's appropriate to transit services. We have not gotten to that point. At this point in time, it probably wouldn't occur until next spring, probably sometime in January and beyond. But that's the status. There are different, I mean, you can use different curriculums, but I do believe that we should be using curriculums that are accepted by the transit industry. And it's best to have curriculums that are certified by the transit industry.
Is there anywhere in your rules and regulations that state that you must use curriculum by the transit industry?
No.
Okay.
The only requirement really is that 16 hours of passenger assistance must be provided, and that annually drivers, operators, schedulers, dispatchers, and supervisors would receive 4 hours of refresher training.
And have you ever tried, the board members ever tried to include this in your rules and regulations that you must use transit industry certification?
Not at this point, but I have during the last month, I did put together the idea of a motion to the board so that is something that could be considered and passed.
I support that, and I hope that you would look into that as the board members. Another question that I have is, were bus routes changed? I mean, it appears just by some of the statements made earlier that bus routes were changed without the AAA process.
That's correct in regards particularly to Green Line.
And this is in a contradiction to the current law?
Yes.
Okay. I do want to inquire, last year there was an article, and I even spoke with you, Mayor, about this when I went to visit you during the campaign, right? To understand really mass transit and how it operates, because I was concerned that perhaps we could be doing better. And so I asked, and you discussed a little bit with me also about some vehicles that you had that have been sitting, that were new, that have been sitting for an X amount of time due to lack of drivers or for whatever reason. And so I want to know, because it was brought up time and time again, there's a 3-year, 36,000-mile warranty. And so do these vehicles apply to that warranty? And how did that impact the timeline of the warranty if they were sitting for 2 years or over a year? Perhaps anyone, Ms. Porter or the mayor.
No, well, those buses, those are the new buses and vans that we were talking about
yes.
during the time of our conversation. I was expressing to you how proud we are that we did not lose the federal funding,
right.
and we finally got buses in new buses because of all the complaints about
right.
the old buses.
But they were sitting for quite some time. There was some
It was, yes,
some of the fleet has been sitting.
we got the buses, but we could not have it out in operation. I mean, there was no contract in regards to that, and so our
So
bottom
how did that
line,
impact the warranty?
it would have impacted the warranty.
Mr.
Yes.
Crisostomo?
Go ahead.
Yes, Madam Senator, it did impact the warranty. the amount of time that the vehicles sit and not in operation, it did impact the warranty because the warranty starts when the vehicle is in our possession.
So how much in dollars did you lose out on because you were GRTA was not able to? You must have lost something in dollars. There must have been some kind of loss. It's not a no, there was no loss, because if you didn't fully use the warranty because vehicles were sitting, there's a loss in dollars. So, Mr. Augustine, you shaking your head east and west does not make sense to me. It's a business. If you're not able to push the equipment out, you lose money.
I absolutely understand that.
And it's not our money.
No.
It's the people's money.
It's the people's money. We all pay taxes. If, and I'm going to give you an hypothetical, if this was a commercially operated venture, which it's not, we would have just taken this 23 buses and say, Mr. Kloppenberg, how would you like to use this? But that's not the case. There was competitive bidding. 6 showed up. Fukuda, Japan Bus Lines, Fleet Services, KI, MSI, and Sanko. There was competition. The fact that the others did not submit a bid, that doesn't mean that we did not make it competitive. So it became a single source.
Sir, I'm not asking.
Single source.
I'm not asking about that.
No.
I'm saying that
I'm
because...
putting a story here, Senator, so let me finish, please. So before we could infuse the buses into the long-term contract, we had to make sure that their long-term contract was available. As soon as that happened in November, December, January was the month-to-month, October, November, December, then January, they got it right away. It sat there, not the whole time. We used 7 of those vans for FESPAC. And the reason for that was a Guam-wide project. So, no, the answer is yes, we lost on the warranty, but for a very good reason.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in the past couple of days, or the 2 public hearings that we've had, I discovered 7 or 8 problematic areas. First, drivers are not trained to industry standard, and usually better business practice says that you do train to industry standard. Bus routes were changed without the AAA process in place, which basically you're breaking the law. Warranties were impacted because the due diligence was not there to ensure that the contract was in place for when the vehicles would arrive. There's a contradiction by the executive manager that the buses run 15 hours a day, purchase orders stay 14 hours a day, so it really wonders what is the billing process, how much are they being billed, and is this billing process accurate? Are we just fudging numbers? There was no maintenance plan into the RFP because of a long-term contract. If you knew that there wasn't going to be enough money to maintain, why would you even do a long-term contract? The Southern Shuttle service costs 3 times more than the average paratransit. The numbers, I'd like to request official documents because this PowerPoint presentation is not an official government document. And the numbers that Miss Myra, forgive me, Miss Myra was stating contradicts with what you're giving us here. And last but not least, and so you know what, it's so interesting because you know, being in the military, you're able to tell who a military person is. And the first thing I asked Senator Aguon was, the chair, I asked him, is the executive manager prior military? And he said, yes. You can tell. You know, you can tell the mannerisms of military if you live it for so long. And I know you're in the military, you've been in the military, so I know you know and understand safety. Everyone is a safety officer. No matter you're a private, you're a sergeant, you're a lieutenant, you're a captain, you're a general, everyone is a safety officer. And this, you writing a letter saying that we do not need vehicle registrations, which means that there's no safety inspection needed, This kind of action relieves any commander of command. And so I really hope that you really contemplate what you're doing, because you're affecting people's lives. You're putting them at risk. And I'm sorry if this is a fact. It's not something made up. It's not my opinion. It's written. It's an official document. And it's beyond me why anyone would risk people's lives. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Nelson. Just to clarify, board members, this responsibility really falls on your shoulder in regards to the maintenance agreement, the oversight program. You heard from your management team that within 30 to 45 days, once that purchase order is approved, that all 17 vehicles will be back out in the streets or readily available for servicing our public transportation requirements. So to all of our ridership out there, in this particular case, we will closely monitor this process. And board members, I'm encouraging you to maintain direct oversight over this process. And if the executive manager or Mr. Crisostomo is in need of additional support in terms of encouraging the process that it proceed forward, then by all means, we need you to do that, because our ridership continue to depend on our public transportation. Thank you once again to the members of the GRTA for coming in to address some of the questions that myself and the senators have shared, that have addressed during the course of this oversight hearing that have been shared by the community. Public transportation is one of the keys in helping to build a stronger community by improving mobility and achieving self-sufficiency. Our community deserves a superior public transportation system. It serves as a lifeline for essential services such as medical treatment, dialysis appointments, or simple errands like paying utilities or buying food. This discussion and open dialogue is a step in the direction to innovative solutions for a more seamless and efficient transportation system. Let us work together as lawmakers, constituents, and members of the GRTA to find those solutions and meet GRTA's mission, which is to provide reliable, accessible, and cost-effective public transportation services to the general public and individuals with disabilities. To all of the GRTA board members and management team, once again, thank you very much. And to KEI representative, thank you for joining us for this oversight
Senator,
hearing. Mr. Copperberg,
I'd like to address the training.
This concludes the oversight hearing, and you can have that personal, direct conversation with the good senator. Thank you very much again, everyone.